1. A little over 3 years ago, I started university. I was so happy that everything was panning out so well that, apparently, it caught one guy's attention. I was passing him by on the staircase when he suddenly stopped and said something like, "Excuse me, I see you are on campus sometimes, and I notice you are always smiling, so I just wanted to get to know you." Considering where I'm posting this story, everybody hearing this probably sees this as a red flag. I would have too, but this is also how I met one of my best friends in high school. She noticed I always seem happy, which wasn't true at the time. I was just trying to stay positive, and our friendship took off from there. So yes, I gave this guy a chance. Now I, for the life of me, can't remember his name because all this happened within the span of 2 days. So to save confusion, I'm dubbing him John. The next time I ran across John wasn't as friendly. I was waiting in the hallways for my class to start when he sat in the chair beside me and started chatting. He kept talking about me and the type of countenance I had, and how I didn't seem wild or aggressive like other girls. This all made sense when he started to marvel about me having light skin. This is pretty normal for me. Unfortunately, I'm black and come from an entirely black family. Yes, I'm aware that we most likely have non-black ancestry, but no living members of our family right now are non-black. But I have less black features because my parents are on the fairer side. I get comments ranging from how I look like an exotic Indian princess to how I'm just a yellow N-word, from fetishists and racists alike. Apparently John was no different. John was a dark-skinned black man himself, and had a notable African accent, but he saw my light skin as a sign that I was docile. Gotta love colorism, am I right? He was creeping me out, so I decided to have him meet my other friends at the university. As soon as I brought that up, he got all shy and left me alone. I told my mom and aunt about it when I got home, and they said I should be flattered. In fact, my mom insisted I be nice to him because the prospect of a boy being interested in me excited her. This is mainly because I am not straight and have never been in a relationship before. But she and my aunt view romantic relationships as a necessity. The next day, I stayed in a far corner of the school to avoid running into John again, while I waited for my next class. It worked, thankfully, but he caught up to me when I was waiting for my ride later on. He said he was looking all over campus for me, and he was able to find me amongst the crowd because of my skin color, and that gold always shines among silver, or something like that. He talked my ear off about my countenance until I forgot what that word even meant anymore. He offered to drive me home, and when I told him that I called an Uber, he asked if I could cancel it. Naturally, I said no, and he continued praising me about his supposed vision of me. I got so desperate to stop his droning that I actually started calling people over I knew to join in the conversation whenever they passed by, and one of them just so happened to be another guy who had set his sights on the innocent freshman girl. I can't remember this guy's name either, so I'm calling him Ted. Ted was nowhere near as obsessive as John was, but he did offer to take me out on a date whenever he saw me alone. He was kind of a neckbeard from what I could tell because he responded to me liking Wonder Woman with, "Don't you think she teaches girls to hate men?" And also Steven Universe with, "I hear they're gonna cancel it because the main guy wore a dress." So I thought, thirsty guy versus thirsty guy. Let's see the shitstorm they start. And to my surprise, they high-five each other and tell me they're best friends. Great. Thankfully, I had the sense to tell John he was being too clingy, and from then on I never saw him again. Which is kinda weird that he just vanished from the face of the campus after that day. As for Ted, he started chasing after other young girls when he followed me into the LGBTQ+ meeting, cornered me and asked me what I was. I'm non-binary. So to Ted and John, I'm glad that we will most likely never meet again. 2. So it was Sunday before a bank holiday Monday, and me and a mate decided to take advantage and go out for a few drinks, as a catch-up, as we hadn't seen each other much on our summer break from uni. We had a good night, a long one, with the two of us leaving to walk home at about 3 in the morning at the dead of night. We'd had a few drinks and felt the buzz, but they were spread out and nothing too strong. so we weren't in a state I'd consider drunk, but more tipsy or schwimmy, as we like to say. My friend lives about a 20-minute walk from the town, heading through small streets and tight estates, in a less than desirable part of town. But we're young and tipsy, so we decide it's worth the risk. We made it about halfway through the journey, heading down one of the larger but still small streets of terraced houses, before we have to cross through a park or field at the end of the street to reach my friend's estate. Now the park is long, and lots of streets parallel to the one we were on run perpendicular to this park, and between the end of the streets and this park is a cobbled alleyway, with high walls and zero lighting, aside from the opening, which is slightly illuminated by the street lamps on the street. Each end house would have windows on the other side where the alley was, overlooking the park. The end house of this particular street had one on the bottom floor where the kitchen was. I would walk past this house on the way to school, which is how I know. Anyway, resuming the story. Me and my mate were about to cross the alley into the park when I look into the alley and see a large man, probably 6'3" and easily 115 kilograms, 250 pounds, stood partially illuminated with his hands and face pressed against this kitchen window, staring right into it. I stopped to stare, not really realizing at first what I was seeing before it clicked. A large man in a skin-tight floral dress was staring into the pitch-black kitchen of a stranger's house in the middle of the night, motionless aside from the rapid rising and falling of his chest. I'm not one to judge a man in a dress, but when he's staring into a house while the owner sleeps, oblivious, it does add to the eerie factor a tad. My friend, not seeming to realize the spook of the situation, just nudges me, giggles, and says, "It's a bit effing creepy, innit?" This alerted the man that we were there, to which his head darted to us. Without a second breath, he sprinted into the pitch-black alleyway, going behind those houses. Having seen no one but this man in our journey home, we suddenly felt very isolated and defenseless. Now me and my friend were both scared, and we, very reluctantly, started crossing this dark park, blabbering to each other to deal with the fear and trying to get through as quickly as we could without getting distracted. We nearly made it out before we heard heavy, rapid footsteps coming closer, but not too close to us. Paralyzed with fear, we just stood still and looked into the darkness, following where the sound was until it ran past a few meters away, and finally emerged into the state on the other side. And he thankfully continued sprinting the opposite way to where we had to go. Once we were sure he had gone, we ran back to my friend's house and just sat down asking each other, "That was effing creepy, wasn't it?" Until we went to sleep. So to the badly dressed nighttime creeper, let's not meet again. 3. 2002, I was 14 years old, starting freshman year. I was an awkward, nerdy girl that didn't know how to handle attention from boys. So you could say I made things worse for my situation. I had a knack for making friends with the weird people no one liked. But I tried to be friendly with everyone I met, so it wasn't a big deal to me. Unfortunately, that was also my downfall. Clubs were a big deal, and they actually had an anime club, so of course I was all about that. First club meeting, I sat next to a couple of friends and soaked it all up. I thought I was finally with my people. Then here comes Stalker Kid. I'd use his real name, but to this day I have no clue what it is. He sat in front of me, and being that person, I said hi. I could tell he was uncomfortable and didn't know anyone, so I was just being nice. And boy, did this guy cling to me for that one word. At first, he would just find me during lunch and just stand there mumbling things to me. He had such a soft voice, high-pitched, mousy little guy that you just felt unnerved when he spoke to you. The way he would look at you as he spoke, I could never look him in the eyes. After a while, it became more asking about my personal life and what I was into. Me being dumb and naive, I tried to be friendly and chat, while feeling incredibly uncomfortable. After a while, my friends and I would move to different tables, benches, even hallways to avoid him. But he always found me. After about a year of this, my best friend finally told me that if I didn't tell him to fuck off, he would. I really didn't want him around anymore, so sure, go ahead. One day, during lunch, here comes Stalker Kid with his signature greeting, barely above a whisper. "Hey." My buddy just goes, "Dude, she's not interested, fuck off." Looking hurt, he shuffles away. I was like, man, you didn't have to be so hard on him, but, thanks? I didn't see him much around school after that, except for club days, where he would just sit across the room and stare at me while my best friend glared at him. Cut to me being 16 and driving now, minus the awkward club days. I didn't really notice anything from him. That is until an old grey beat-up car started parking next to me extremely close. One day after school, he was waiting for me in that car. He started asking me how I've been, what about prom, all that stuff. I was trying to rack my brain on how he knew that was my car. Unless he had been watching me before and after school. I started getting there later and leaving later to avoid him, because he was like clockwork. Finally, a boy I used to be friends with in elementary school was walking out with me, and made a comment about how that guy was always next to my car, and asked if he was my boyfriend. I immediately said no, and he's always following me around and I hated it. It was really starting to freak me out. Bless this guy, because he walked right up to him and scared him off, threatening if he ever parked near me again, he would kick his ass. I figured maybe that was enough to keep him away. So again, there was a small space where I would hear nothing of him except for my friends who had classes with him telling me how creepy he was. One friend had art class with him and said he would draw naked women constantly in his books. All big, busted, sexy pose women. Classy guy. Junior year is wrapping up, and I started taking my BFF, Phil we'll call him, to and from school. He was on my way, so I figured why not. At some point, Phil started noticing that little grey car was always heading the same way after school, and made a joke thinking, what if Stalker Kid lived next to him? Small world, right? I could only be so lucky. One day, as per usual, little grey car was following us, so we took a detour. Sure enough, he was with us every step of the way. And it was no longer a joke. We both started freaking out. I pushed that gas pedal as hard as my foot could push it, and noped out of sight. I went home and told my mom everything, because at this point, I knew this wasn't normal. She shoved it aside, saying I was probably seeing things, blah blah blah. Well, it came time for our end-of-year party. Of course, SK, we'll call Stalker Kid from now on, was a senior, so I would never have to see him again. For whatever reason, I offered to host the party, thinking he hasn't gone to one yet. Let's celebrate this moment. I was terrified when my dad let him in the door. I don't remember giving him an invitation to the party, so someone must have given it to him. He spent the whole party talking to me, my dad being all buddy-buddy with him, asking me where my room was. I just wanted to cry and hide. It was all downhill after that. I remember there were days where I would hear a car pull up outside my front door, and my room having a window that saw the front. I would call my buddy Phil and peek to see if it was him. 3 times in a month. I just hid under my desk and cried on the phone with Phil. Other events from school would be him asking a girl I played softball with to prom, only to dump her and follow me all night. This includes to after prom, where I never saw him in person. Our high school had a radio and TV channel for kids to run, and during prom they would record us going up the stairs and playing around in the gym at after prom for the parents to see their kids having fun. Took one of my friends to point it out, but it showed me playing DDR for a while against my friend Phil, and SK was standing right behind me watching for a good 5 minutes. Never knew. And the one that still creeps me out to this day is graduation for his class. Our classes were so big they did a day and night ceremony, where all students had to attend the day one. I was scanning the crowd to see my friends who were graduating when I saw a hand wave as I passed by. I looked back, and of course it was SK waving at me. How he picked me out of a crowd of thousands I will never know. 2006 senior year was great. No signs of creepy SK to the point where I kind of forget about him. I graduate, I choose a college in town, get a job at a local retail store, and move on. Life was beginning to be normal. I work the gaming department, so you get the weird randos once in a while. One that I saw a lot was this little Mexican guy with glasses, this is important I swear, who never purchased anything but would just walk around from time to time. Then this motherfucker SK comes strolling in the doors and walks into gaming and just talks. I asked how he knew I worked here. He said his friends saw me and knew we were friends. I tried to radio for help over and over, for someone to come and get him out. Finally, a big guy from computers walks by and asks for my help in the back. Once he pulls me to safety, I tell him everything. From that point, security is aware and is told to watch for this guy. Of course, he wasn't doing anything physical, so all they could do for me is watch out for him. So every time he came in, they would walkie me, and I would dip back to the warehouse. I started seeing his friend, who we called Ninja Friend, NF now, constantly, and all he ever did was walk around on his phone. I began to suspect he was texting SK to tell him I was at work, because sure enough, 10 minutes later he would come in too. So I tested this theory and started walking randomly around the store. At one point, a friend who worked register asked why I would do this. So I had her take a walk with me on her break. I told her this NF would follow us everywhere, even just going down a random aisle. Sure enough, he did, and she began freaking out. A few minutes later, I told her my stalker would walk through those doors again, sure enough. So I'm making my way to the warehouse, and out steps Ninja Friend from an aisle and says, "She's right here!" I just stared at him like, "Who the hell do you think you are?" SK walks up behind me and asks why I'm always running away from him and, oh, he lost my number, and asks if I can give it to him again. I say, knowing damn good and well I never gave it to him, sure. I go to the warehouse and write, "This is where I work, don't ever come here again," and hand it to him, glare at his friend, walkie security about him, and sit in the warehouse and break down. Security tells me later he also cried while they took him out. Later that day, as I'm leaving work, security officers walk me to my car. This, of course, isn't the rules, but friends care about friends, so I say sure. SK is out by my car waiting for me, so this is where security says screw it and calls the police, which we are conveniently next to their headquarters. He books it when he sees the car. A few years go by, nothing comes up. I buy a fancy new car and don't see him much. I'm thinking that did the trick and I'm finally free. 2012. My buddies and I are leaving work, ready to hit a night at the bar per usual Thursday deal. We are all walking out the door where we all have to stand and wait to hear the alarm sound to verify it's armed. As we are walking out, I hear it. That awful sound. "Hey!" I cringe, grab my friend's arm and turn. There he is, leaning on his car, waiting. My friend recognizes him and asks what he wants. Guy says he just wants to talk to me. He didn't ever see my car, so he didn't think I worked here anymore. His other friend is sitting in the backseat of his car, just staring at me blankly. I start to think the worst. If my friends leave me here, my gut tells me I'm not coming into work the next day. Or ever. I'm terrified that he's had years of time to think about our last encounter where I wrote my number down and made him cry. I grab my friend's arm tighter. My friend goes off, pretends to be my boyfriend and rips into him. My friend is about 2 feet taller and much, much bigger. They get into it, and I'm just standing in the parking lot. And I'm a terrible person for this, but I'm sure you understand at this point, thinking, kick his ass! He spooks SK so bad that I'm pretty sure he wet himself before getting into his car and booking it. Ever since, if he comes into the store, my friend stares him down from his office and he leaves. Never has bought anything in all these years. Years later I've moved on, gotten married and moved out of town. Recently we've moved back to start a business, and to this day I still feel myself looking behind me at stores just in case I randomly bump into him. He caused me to have anxiety, mental and emotional pain, fear and trust issues for a decade, even after moving on. I still feel the effects today, and I never even knew his name. Update. Alright, I wrote this last night while laying in bed on my phone, so there weren't a lot of specific details. To those who think I was playing the damsel in distress, no. I did not just roll over and let my friends do it all for me. These instances were just the big ones that I had friends to help me out. Yes, the way I handled him was terrible. But you have to understand that as soon as I hurt him, my brain just froze, and I wanted the experience to last as short as it possibly could. And for a teenager, that stuff is terrifying. As I got older, I didn't tolerate this as much because I thought after high school I was safe. After it started affecting me at work, I didn't just rely on my friends to help me. There are plenty of times that I encountered him that I haven't written here because they weren't anything more than the usual crap from him, like, "Seeing anyone? How's work?" I would make it short and be like, "Yup, I'm at work, can you, not bother me?" So once it got to the point that his little friend started following me around, and he was waiting for me, that's when my friend stood up for me. Also, a lot of people have asked me why I didn't just look his name up in a yearbook. I had never really cared to put a name to that face because I honestly wanted as little to do with him as possible. But after this post, I have reached out to my old high school buddies and asked if any of them have a yearbook I can borrow to find his name. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 427. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And a quiet descends across the neighborhood. The Hellfreezer sits quietly upon his throne, pleased, but anxious, for there is work ahead, and there is quiet time in which to do it. The Hellfreezer looks down upon his land, surveys his domain, and then he notices he's getting kinda hungry, so he should stop messing around and get on with the videos. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.